Hello, Data for Democracy. Hi, I'm Nick Colley, one of the volunteers for D4D. And with us tonight, we have the amazing team from the Chicago Lobbying Group. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Stephanie Kermer, and obviously in Chicago, and I have just left the University of Chicago after 3 years working in data there, and I'm going to be starting as a data scientist at Uptake next week. So that's my professional sort of spiel. You can learn more at stephaniekermer.com.
Nice. And Stephen?
Sure. I'm a data scientist at Civis Analytics here in Chicago.
Nice. So this is the project that we're talking about today. This was one that was kicked off from our hackathon, correct?
That's right. Yeah, it was nothing more than a twinkle in my eye before the hackathon, and then it became a complete project with multiple, visual representations online after, and it was quite a burst of effort from a lot of people.
Nice. Now, were y'all previously D4D members, or were y'all new to the community when you joined?
I found out about it from a post on Medium, I want to say sometime in January. And then just got on Slack and sort of began chatting with people at that time, but I didn't have any other particular associations. I joined the Chicago channel and started talking to people about organizing this thing, the hackathon, and that was about it.
Nice. What about you, Stephen?
Yeah, I heard about D4D from one of my contacts on Twitter a few months ago, I guess back in January maybe, and didn't have a lot of time to get involved until the hackathon. That was a chance for me to kickstart involvement.
That's awesome. So what made y'all want to dive in or start working on a project? Was it just the hackathon just kind of fell into the right time, or there was a project that was really interesting to you? What drove y'all to dive in?
Well, for me, I had this idea before the hackathon, but it was something that came out of sort of churning through some ideas in my head, and sort of looking around at the city data portal. Chicago's data portal is pretty cool, and it has just recently been redesigned to be even cooler. And so I knew that there was a lot of data out there, and I wasn't quite sure. Until I started looking around and sort of seeing what was available, I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go with it. But then this idea of a project about lobbyists and the money swirling around and the lobbying of the municipal officials got really interesting. And so so I brought that sort of idea with me to the hackathon, but I didn't really know how it was going to end up.
Nice. Stephen, for you, it sounds like you were just at the hackathon in Chicago and you heard the pitches?
Yeah, that's right. I heard Stephanie's pitch at the hackathon, and I live in Chicago. I care about the government here, and I was interested in seeing what I could do with the data and seeing what we could figure out about what's going on with the government in Chicago.
That's really cool. While you were, if there's any D4Ders or anyone on the YouTube channel watching, we do have, feel free to ask questions. We have the live chat up, and if you're a D4Der, feel free to jump on the stream. It's posted in the general channel, and feel free to ask at any point during this, so we'll make sure we get it thrown out here. So Stephanie, what was your pitch?
It was mostly that I knew that this data set, that at least a couple of data sets existed about the contributions from lobbyists to officials in the city, the alderman, the mayor, others, the county board, and that kind of thing. I knew that this data existed. I didn't really know anything about what was in it. I had barely scraped the surface of what it contained. And so I pitched the idea that, okay, there's this data there, and you and I and people in this room, if you're interested in making it into something, we should go ahead and do that. I had an idea of a network iGraph, and we actually ended up with one, which was pretty amazing because I did not know exactly how to develop such a thing. And so I said, we got this data. Let's go and dig into it and figure out what we can put together. And I think there's an element of it has a lot of possibility, and there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved in make a contribution to the larger project when it's, you know, an idea with sort of a loose structure gives people a chance to put their own stamp on it. So.
Yeah, so if you came in with no, that's really cool, because it's that was one of the things that this was our first hackathon, so we were very curious to see how people would come in with new ideas and new pitches. So Stephen, when you heard this, and Stephanie was like, "Yeah, we have data." How did that help the pitch for you as a listener, as a potential volunteer on it?
Yeah, that's certainly a plus. Of course, I ended up getting new data for the project, so I wasn't using the data from the city portal.
Ooh, so that's actually a nice little tangent. So Stephanie, you had identified some data on the Chicago website. Stephen, what kind of data do you find that you pulled in to help this project?
Yeah, we were talking in the initial setup, all brainstorming about where we could go with this, and somebody asked, could we bring in voting records from the alderman, the city council members, and but that's not on the city data portal. And as people were talking, I did some quick Googling, and I found there's a city clerk's website, and there's a bunch of PDFs for the roll call votes. And it looked like it was relatively structured. So I said, hey, look, the data's here. It's in nice format in PDFs. I can get this. And if I knew exactly how much effort it was going to take to PDFs, maybe I would have stuck with the data on the city data portal. But relatively structured, relatively.
So it sounds like some of the bigger challenges was just trying to pull data out of the PDFs?
It was pretty easy converting the PDFs to text documents, and there were two formats of PDFs which were laid out in tables, but the conversion from the PDF to the text format left a little bit of scrambling here and there, and there was a lot of writing logic to find corner cases and clean up work in special cases.
Awesome. Yeah. So you're dealing with a lot of just row cleanup of just random string characters.
Yeah, or misaligned. Trying to figure out, trying to parse the tables out of the text data.
Okay. So Stefan, we've got a question from Kevin on YouTube. I assume that the pitch is on one of the Slack channels or somewhere else. I'm starting to put together my own thoughts and would like to get some inspiration.
No, actually, this was a pitch I did in person to the room full of people who had arrived. I did talk a little bit about some of the ideas around this on the Chicago channel and the Slack team before the actual in-person meeting, but I didn't really, I mean, most of the people that attended our hackathon were not in the Slack channel and not on the Slack team at all. So I went into the room and just sort of sold my idea, and whoever was in person, there, who was interested in doing it was welcome to join in. But if someone wants to specifically talk about how to structure a pitch, I'm no expert, but I've done one. You can check me out on Slack.
Would you be okay if we were like, hey, can you recall that pitch from a couple weeks ago and do it on the spot again?
I don't know. I mean, it is a little hard now because now I know what it turned into. And I don't think at the time, for example, I had any real thoughts about like the voting records being included, which is obviously what Stephen spearheaded and was able to make happen. And after I did, the 2-minute sort of, here's the idea, let's look into when lobbyists give money to officials. Then we went into a different room, everybody who was interested in that project, and like got up in front of the dry erase board and we're like, drawing out, okay, so we could draw this connection to this connection. And people were looking at the data in real time to say, okay, well, I think that's here, but that other piece that you've got on the diagram isn't here, so we may have to go look for that elsewhere. And, it was very, it was collaborative and it was iterative for sure.
Gotcha. Stephen, Kevin has a follow-up question for you. Did you take the opportunity to lobby the government to stop using PDFs and move towards open formats?
It could have been much worse than it was.
I hear that. If any government official ends up watching this, please open formats.
Yeah, all the PDFs in a nice downloadable form on the website, so I got to give them that.
Hey, that's
And they go back a long time. They went back to what was it? It's like 2003, 2004, something really far back.
Mid 2000s, yeah.
Yeah, so God knows what the formats they were using in those days.
Having looked at some of the lobbyist data for North Carolina, where you find handwritten documents and typed up documents. So Chicago's a much better state than the state of North Carolina.
A lot better than that here, yeah.
Yeah. Very fortunate.
So with a short timeline with a hackathon, did you have any scoping challenges?
Yeah, I think because I didn't really come in with a ton of knowledge about what the data actually contained and looked like, there were some challenges figuring out, so what can we feasibly do with the group of people we had. I think we had probably 15 people ended up working on this over the course of the 2 days here and there. So we did that brainstorming at the very beginning with get out the markers and draw it out and see what we think is really there. And we definitely didn't initially have the alderman or their equivalent of the city council. It wasn't our initial boundary, but it ended up being that boundary because we realized that spreading it further afield to all of the different sort of little city officials and areas of the county, for example, we were like, no, we cannot do that as well during the time that is available here. So we cut it down to just the alderman and made sure to that keeping it like that helped. We also tried to initially, at least, we were keeping it to the current alderman, which there are often changes in the alderman, and somebody gets promoted or goes to work for Uber, or and a special election is held, and this and that. So we initially sort of stuck to the current alderman. After the hackathon, we've gone back and added a few of previous aldermen, specifically because we had some more historical data. But yeah, so we were thinking about sort of the temporal limits of like how far back in history can we go with these, and the the bodies of government that would be possible to work on and not drive ourselves crazy. And then we split stuff up too. We had groups like Stephen was leading up with the stuff on the voters, and we had some people working on the what kind of industries are these lobbyists representing, and then some people working on where exactly which lobbyists are giving money to whom, and like the central piece. And so then we combine chunks at the end. Okay.
For playing a little naive, I keep hearing the word alderman pop up. What is an alderman?
Sure. There are, I guess, 50 wards in Chicago, and they're little tiny sort of fiefdoms, if you will. The city council is sort of made up of aldermen who represent wards. So every alderman has a ward. I'm in the first ward, for example, and my alderman is named Moreno, and he is particular, he is sort of in charge of things like making sure the potholes get filled in my area, making sure the street lights aren't out, and making sure that, to be a face when there's, trouble with, violence in the neighborhood or things like that. He's the one who lobbies on behalf of our little part of the town to the mayor and to the police chief and things like that.
Okay, so did you focus on all of the aldermans, or did you kind of limit it down to a smaller subset?
We went ahead and did all of them. I mean, they're all, if any data set that includes one is going to include them all, pretty much. And the data that we had from the city was actually really good, especially as far as who are the lobbyists, what are their clients, and then which lobbyists are giving money to which alderman. We, I think our data on the actual funds that are being transferred goes back to 2012. So it's not as far back as the voting records, but it wasn't too bad to include all 50 aldermen in the work that we were doing. Yeah.
Okay. Were there any challenges aside from the PDF data, like in acquiring any of this data? It sounded like Chicago was pretty open.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there was a ton of other trouble with acquiring the data. There were some challenges in sort of the lack of a code book for a lot of the data. We get a data set and it has an ID number for the lobbyist, for example. And we thought initially, okay, that must be a person. Lobbyist, Joe Smith is a lobbyist, he gets an ID number. No. And then because we found Joe Smith repeating it over and over again with, and we dealt the same guy, but a different lobbyist ID. We're like, okay, what's that about? So then we start digging around and we're thinking maybe it's the lobbyist client relationship. And so like when he's lobbying for, company ABC, then it's lobbyist ID number 1. And if he's lobbying for a company, XYZ, it's lobbyist ID number 2. And that is also wrong, turns out. It's actually annual. Every year, every lobbyist gets a new ID number. And so the guy, Joe Smith's, got the same lobbyist ID for all of 2012, but then in 2013 it changes. So we found that out by trial and error because it's not documented anywhere.
Wow. Okay. So even when cities do open data, it sounds like some of the challenges are around the data dictionary and really coming to terms with that.
I think that's definitely true, and I think Chicago is working on it in a lot of areas. And the new revising of the and redesign of the data portal has actually added some data dictionary components that we didn't have at the time when we were doing this hackathon. But you end up doing a lot of scouring through, like Googling the city websites for the ordinance that's about the thing that, explains what the term means. And in my previous work at the University of Chicago, we worked a lot with, say, municipal data, but from like school district and the police department. And always you're kind of ponderously, digging through old documents to figure out what exactly, this particular code means in the data. And so I think if cities are, interested in making their data more useful after just making it like a baseline of accessibility, making documentation available would really help a lot. And I think it helps for us to not draw the wrong conclusions about the data and not to, jump to ideas that may not be correct, because cities don't want to be misportrayed in data or online. And if they don't give us the information to understand what we're seeing, then they run the risk of being misinterpreted.
So when you started taking this data and figuring out what these different codes mean, did you find any surprises once you started visualizing it?
Well, I think we were somewhat surprised by just how much money there was floating around, which anybody who wants to can see on the visuals that we posted. There are 3 different web pages. There's one that's just a Shiny app devoted to the voting records that Stephen put together. I threw up this Shiny app that isn't anything super fancy, but Stephen's code is linked there on his GitHub page, and then we also have some visualizations that you can see. You can like search for terms in the names of the legislation, for example. So if you search for the Olympics, Chicago was trying to get the 2016 Olympics and didn't get it, and there were some votes taken on that. There's some things about the parking meters as well. And so this will be the Shiny app that's under my Shiny account. If I haven't sent it to you, let me do that now so that you have it, because that would be helpful.
Cool. And all these links will be in the doobly-doo down below. So that we can find it, or so that you can find it.
Yeah. Let me give you the voting records link real quick here on Slack. Cool. So that's the voting one that I just sent you, Nick. And here's the one with the lobbyist funding is the second one. So you can look at them both. Both be live and running now. I flew right past my free Shiny account a while back because people were interested in looking at these things, but I'm paying now, so they should be up.
Nice. So we're looking at the aldermanic voting records. So walk me through what we're seeing here.
Sure. So, Stephen could probably speak to this as well as I could, but the alderman is obviously the person that we talked about. The ward is who they represent. So if you were to take that ward, you can then search for the actual street boundaries. So we still have some trouble with the aldermen's names, in that some of them are surnames and some of them are first and last, but you get the idea. So yeah, first ward is my ward right now, and Flores was my old alderman, and Moreno is my new alderman. So the vote, what they mean in the actual vote column is listed at the top, so key to votes. So yes and no, but then A is absent, and V is non-voting, V is vacant, etc. So yeah, you can see that. What year was the thing is obviously also...
Sorry.
Okay, go back. So yeah, this is the other one, but yeah, so then the record number, Stephen, you might be able to tell more about the record than I could. I think it's just the number that's assigned to the legislation, right?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah, and the title is just, what it's called in the voting record. So some of these are really obtuse and unclear, and some of them are really handy. Like I say, if you go to the search button on the box on the far right and search Olympics, you'll find some records, which is kind of cool, because then you can see, except not for First Ward, I guess just the one. Yeah, so it's authorization for execution of agreements, blah, 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 for the bid for the 2016 Olympics. So if you were curious if your alderman was in favor of the Olympics being hosted in Chicago or not, you could see through that. So that's kind of the gist, yeah. This is the voting side.
Okay. That is awesome. And then what was it that I accidentally clicked onto?
That's the lobbyist data. So this is the money that's being given to the aldermen. And
okay.
So, yeah. So this is the other shiny app that came out of this. And so the network graph that we also have is a D3 app, so it's not actually made in Shiny. And our colleague Nate was the lead on that and put it together. But this shows you where the money is, basically. So pick somebody, anybody at all, and you can then see. Wait, it's not what you're seeing is not quite right. I don't know why it's not, the filter is not working, because it should be showing you a table at the bottom. That's weird.
It's the law of demos. It always happens.
Yeah, okay.
Let's try it in Chrome. I was doing the cardinal sin of doing it in IE.
It should work. Yeah, I mean, because I'm using, Internet Explorer, I don't even know how that even works anymore. But yeah, here you go. So it'll search for Burke, and you can see that person. If you hover over the bars, it will show you how much they earn at any given time. I think it will. Well, anyway, if you go back to all aldermen, it should go to all there. Now, if you scroll down, just scroll down the page. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Now you get a table, and this will show you all the details. So the bars are sort of how much money that individual alderman has received over the entire history that's available here. But then you can look more closely at exactly what organization that alderman was affiliated with, and what lobbyist gave the money, and when the day was, how much it was given, and what firm the lobbyist represented at the time.
Now, when y'all were exploring this data, did you find that the lobbying firm or the group that the lobbying firm was representing was some weird name that really didn't have too much meaning, or is it pretty straightforward as XYZ company?
Oh, they're pretty obtuse. Yeah, they're not real clear. And we have an additional data point that is the clients that are represented by the lobbying firms, but we don't have a one-to-one link between the dollar amount and the client. We just know that, say, Better Price is, represents, pool of clients XYZ, and we're able to put that on the network graph, but we can't really include it in here because, like I say, these are rows are by the amount of money that was given to that alderman at that given day, and we can't tell which client they meant to give it for, so to speak. So yeah, so that makes a little bit of a limitation on that, but it's neat because then you can search. Some of the names of the firms are kind of interesting. Some of the firm names actually do make for some interesting information. But I think, if I'm right, I'm trying to think. There was one that I remember being, because you can search the whole thing, and you can also look at the lobbying firm on the top left search bar on the site, and you can just scroll through the lobbying firms, and sometimes you see stuff like the Illinois Petroleum Council, which is pretty clear. Sometimes you see stuff like, Denton's US, which is obtuse. So.
Okay. So we kind of talked about this a little abstractly, but one of the questions from YouTube is, did you consider doing anything in tying lobbyists back to the sources or looking for where one works for more than one org?
Yeah, we really did. We tried a lot of different ways to make that sort of come together. And if you pull up Nate's network graph, which is the third visualization we put together, I think that's actually the best way to see how those relationships work still, even though the dollar amounts are not easily sort of connectable back to the alderman. You can connect them. The dollar amounts are not connectable to the client. You can see who's representing who, though. Do you need the link to that? That was the first viz you pulled up at the beginning.
Pulling it up now. There it is.
There you go. So yeah, so this is really cool because, as I say, Nate Robliski put this together, and he should get amazing credit for this. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to be here today. But if you pick a recipient, they're all aldermen, and so you just pick a name, and you'll be able to see for that individual and tap the points. You'll see the lobbyist. You'll see where that lobbyist's giving their contributions, and then you'll see the funder at the end. And that funder may be their lobbying firm, and sometimes they may be the client. It depends. So you can see where the money sort of transfers through. So they gave that lobbyist, that much money, and then the lobbyist was able to distribute that through different individuals. So you get a chance to sort of look at them all in a really nice way that is easy to sort of conceptualize, and I think this adds a lot to the whole project, and I think it's really, really pretty awesome.
So out of curiosity, what's with the outlier here? We're seeing a lot of connections in between, but then we have
if you hover
David.
the dark blue dot there on the outlier, that's Alderman Beal. Apparently, that's it. That's all he's got. I don't know why there's not more for him. But if you go and then pull down recipient, you'll see that like Beal, if you hit that, you should just get that little outlier. Yeah, that's it. So and that also means that lobbyist was not involved in any other of the aldermen, and that funder wasn't funding any other lobbyists, and it just happened that way. But for the most part, you see pretty tangled up networks where a lot of lobbyists are contributing to the same alderman, and a lot of aldermen are getting money from different lobbyists. So.
Gotcha. So what kind of response have you had? Has Chicago kind of responded to this, or how's the media picked it up or run with it?
No, nobody said anything to me. I saw just Data for Democracy. Have you heard anything, Stephen? No. I showed some friends, I was going to spread it around, but yeah, no, so far it hasn't picked up anything as far as I can tell. Maybe now it will, who knows?
Let's hope. So is the project still ongoing?
I think, I don't think anybody's doing anything real active right now. In the couple of weeks right after the hackathon, I was definitely trying to fit together a few more pieces of the puzzle and get some things finished. And Lillian Wong, another of our organizers, was helping to do some of that. But I think we'd like to, if people have ideas for additional pieces of this puzzle they'd like to put together, then we would love to, do more and add to it. But I think where we've landed is a really useful tool that like the average citizen could use to get a better picture of where their alderman's money is coming from. And that was kind of one of the things that we wanted to produce at the end. We wanted something that would be useful for average people. So.
Nice. So as stated, these links will be down in the description below for people to grab a hold and look at it.
All the code is linked in those too. So if you view the Shiny apps, then there should be a link at the bottom of the text section on each one that's like the code is here. So go look.
Awesome. So one last question to both of y'all. If you were to do this hackathon all over again, what would you do differently, or how would you approach the hackathon differently?
I might. Well, I think, and one of the things that I forgot to mention too is that we use Data for Democracy or Data World a lot in this, putting the data sets together, but we didn't do a lot of that in advance. And I think that might have been a handy thing to do in advance. It'd be to have a better sense of the data and have more of it loaded up in data world, because it's so much easier to look at it there than to have it on like someone's hard drive, or to like everybody be going to the city data portal and trying to dig around. So that's one thing I would think. I mean, just, we didn't have a lot of advanced planning. I was busy planning like how we're going to get pizza for this thing. So I didn't have a lot of like planning in the data side to do. But that's one thing I would do.
Too.
Yeah, and it was good pizza. What do you think, Stephen?
Let's see. If I were to do it again, I think I might not actually scrape the voting record.
Just do it. Okay.
I mean, the result is good. I like the result, but in terms of output for effort during a hackathon, I think there would have been maybe more effective ways to spend my time with the data that we already had from the city data portal, rather than cleaning new sources of data. So I wasn't really anticipating how long it would take to really get all of it put together.
Data wrangling is like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it can be. Now, you did reference data.world, so I'm going to tag on the question. Was that a pivotable technology that you all ended up using?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because and if you actually look at the code behind the Shiny apps, they all the two Shiny apps draw from data sets on data.world. They're not like, I didn't load the data into the Shiny apps. I just have them drawn from the link to data world, so that when we change data or make adjustments to, say, add another field or make, do whatever we might need to do on the data set, we can do it on data world, and it will automatically be like the app will just know, and the app will just pull in whatever changes we made. If we clean a field and make it better, it'll just be there. I don't have to redeploy the app. I don't have to do anything crazy. And it's also been handy because we were able to do the joins between the discrete data sets that were available in the city data portal, just using the SQL functionality inside data world, which I had never really played much with before. But Sharon who's a staff member at data world, was visiting our site for the hackathon and was super helpful in helping me like figure out what I was doing there. Yeah, so we got a lot of the data sets put together in a single project on Data World, so that we kind of were able to all be looking at the same place when we're actually working on them too. I mean, there were a ton of really great functionalities that I had never played really with before, and we're really glad we had it.
We have one last question from YouTube. I would encourage the team to see if CityCamp, which is a national programming group, to see if they have a Chicago organization, and if they do, to take this project to them to see how to continue it on and continue development.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I don't know anything about them.
We are looking. D4D is currently in the process of finding the right contact to reach out to, and we're in the process of planning our next hackathon for end of Q3. And we're trying to find the right orgs to partner with that are doing similar projects. So we'll be hearing more about them hopefully soon.
Sweet.
But, cool. Well, any closing thoughts?
It was really fun. I was glad to do it, and yeah, it was really cool to get to meet all the people who came to the hackathon. If any of them are watching now or watching later, it was fun, and I'm glad you guys came. Yeah, and the people at Metis were actually the ones who hosted us. We did our hackathon on site at the new Metis space in Chicago, and they were really, really great too. So thanks to them.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank y'all for your time. Thanks for joining, and have a great night. Until next time, D4D. See you later.
Bye.